Hi guys, one of the reasons I caution anyone in the world to not support leftists of anywhere on earth is because wherever leftists start running things, they will turn it into a third world or fourth world crap hole. One such example today is from a gigantic, probably the biggest ecological disaster in the history of USA that is going on, and the response of the transport secretary of that country. A transport secretary meaning basically transport minister, if we talk in India equivalent definitions. We will get into the transport secretary's reaction, or rather the lack of it, a little later in the video, but first let's get into what exactly happened. And remember, this guy got the job pretty much just because he's homosexual. You won't believe how irresponsibly the transport secretary has behaved, and you would not ever imagine such a thing in India. Ohio residents, it's a place called East Palestine for no connection to Palestine apparently. It was just randomly named Palestine because they were naming based on Abrahamic religious places, names of Abrahamic religious places, so that's why they ended up naming this place East Palestine, absolutely randomly. I have checked this. So this place called East Palestine in Ohio has had this gigantic train derailment, which has mysteriously been absolutely almost not covered at all by mainstream journalists and newspaper houses who are usually inclined to support Joe Biden and this government. And therefore 10 days have about 10 days have passed before this got actually some national attention. And you won't believe the things that have happened in this accident. So Ohio residents fear train derailment, poisoned air, ground, report animals dying. Ohio residents report a foul smell, headaches, and sick and dying animals near the site of toxic chemical burn to clean up the train accident. Officials say it is safe for residents in and around East Palestine, Ohio, to return home after a train derailment released toxic chemicals into the environment nearly 2 weeks ago, 14 days back. But they already declared it is safe for residents in and around Palestine to get back home. So I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist and claim that it's definitely dangerous, even though the US government has said it's dangerous, but let's not ignore the long-term implications of living in such an area. And also remember, this place is very poor, basically lower middle class and lower class people live here, and they were huge supporters of Donald Trump. So who knows if that's a reason to ignore these people. However, the Environmental Protection Agency has warned contaminated soil may not have been disposed of properly. A broken axle of the train sent nearly 50 train cars, including 10 carrying vinyl chloride, spiraling off the tracks on February 3. No one was injured in the accident, but hazardous chemicals spilled onto the ground. 3 days later, residents were ordered to evacuate while Ohio officials executed a controlled release of vinyl chloride to prevent an explosion, which sent thick clouds of poisonous smoke billowing into the air. Accidents may happen, accidents are accidents, but who knows why all the worst things in USA's history are happening all at the same time. Maybe because of too much reservations in every step of hiring and even graduation and things like that, etc. Entire stream of actions. Who knows who screwed up their job and why. East Palestine Fire Chief Keith Drabick said on February 7 that air and water testing showed it was safe for residents to return home. However, some of those who have done so have reported sick and dying animals in the area. Taylor Holzer, who operates a dairy farm just outside the evacuation zone in East Palestine, told WKBN, a local news channel, that several foxes he kept have puffy and swollen faces, and one even got sick and died. He says out of nowhere he just started coughing really hard, just shut down and had liquid diarrhea and just went very fast. Died very fast, Holzer said. Now let's check out what Pete Buttigieg, who is the transport secretary right now and who ran for presidency in 2020 and will do so in 2024 as well. I think he will lose disastrously. But let's check out what has been his response and how he has been bashed both by the Republicans and Democrats, the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democrats, obviously, because they hate Pete Buttigieg because he's not socialist enough. But Pete Buttigieg screws up anyway, and the mainstream news has not had a problem with it because the mainstream news wants to be an umbrella mouthpiece for both the Bernie Sanders wing and the Pete Buttigieg Joe Biden wing. They become extremely anti-Bernie Sanders only during the elections. During the elections, remember, even this time in 2020, Bernie Sanders had almost won the nominations for becoming the presidential candidate from the Democratic Party. But at the last moment, Barack Obama himself got into the game. He called up everyone, said, hey, drop out against Joe Biden. Otherwise, Joe Biden will lose and none of you all will get to become any secretary or anything. Because Bernie Sanders is going to kick all of you out of the party or is going to make you ineffective and inactive. So just when Bernie Sanders was about to win the candidacy, everyone against all these Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, everyone else dropped out, just fell off like drunk flies. And that's how Joe Biden became the candidate of the Democratic Party. So much democracy, thriving democracy in USA, no thriving democracy, only fascism in India, bro. Now let's check out Buttigieg's reaction. So in the thriving democracy that is USA, Ohio train derailment adds to Buttigieg's growing list of slow responses after he waited 10 days to address this. Ohio Democrats slammed Buttigieg in tweet, "We deserve better than this." Now can you imagine this thing going on in India? Can you imagine this ever happening in India, that a gigantic train derailment happens, or even a small train derailment happens and the transport department ministry does not utter one word about this? Let's see what he did. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg waited 10 days to address the ongoing environmental disaster in Ohio that forced thousands of people out of their homes, adding to a growing list of examples of the former mayor being slow to act. A Norfolk Southern freight train hauling vinyl chloride and other hazardous chemicals derailed in February 3. Sending up a toxic plume that burned for days in East Ohio. Buttigieg failed to mention the derailment in a speech at the National Association of Counties conference on Monday, sparking a wave of backlash from both sides of the political aisle. And check out this headline: Buttigieg's popularity soars as local leaders jockey for $211 billion in infrastructure cash. He's coming up with a more socialist policy now. Now, Buttigieg discussed topics like racial disparity, transportation safety, and the largely Democrat-backed infrastructure bill during the event, but he didn't tweet until later Monday evening, 10 days after the derailment, that he is quote-unquote concerned about the impacts of the disaster. US DOT has been supporting the investigation led by the Transportation Safety Board. Buttigieg tweeted in part, We will look to these investigation results and based on them, use all relevant authorities to ensure accountability and continue to support safety. Now let's check out who has he received criticism from. And before that, commentators across Twitter slammed the Transportation Secretary for prioritizing his speech over what some have compared to the nuclear Chernobyl disaster of 1986 in the USSR. So this is Meghan McCain. She is a Republican. She is the daughter of Senator John McCain, who used to be a Vietnam veteran. He was in fact tortured in Vietnam for whatever interrogations and stuff, and then he became a very anti-Trump Republican. So this is his daughter. People are being poisoned because of a toxic train derailment in Ohio, and the Secretary of Transportation has absolutely nothing to say about it. And then this is Nina Turner. She is a very big Bernie Sanders, in the Bernie Sanders faction of the Democrat Party, and she used to be, I think, the campaign manager of Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign. She writes, "He jokes about balloons while ignoring East Palestine. Oh, we deserve better than this." I'm not sure about that. Buttigieg was most recently slammed on both sides of the aisle for his response to the ongoing airline meltdown that continues to leave travelers stranded and delayed in US airports. Airline meltdown as well. In August, a bipartisan group of 38 state attorney generals wrote to Congress to report that Buttigieg was failing to adequately respond to airline consumer complaints, and they asked for legislation to allow states to enforce federal consumer protection laws. And this is what happens when you give a job to a guy based on who he has sex with instead of his actual qualifications of administration. Americans are justifiably frustrated that federal government agencies charged with overseeing airline consumer protection are unable or unwilling to hold the airline industry accountable and to swiftly investigate complaints submitted to the US DOT, read the letter signed by Arizona's Mark Brainovich, New York's Latita James, and others. During a September appearance on The Late Show with James Corden, Buttigieg responded to the crisis by saying he was increasing pressure on US airlines. "I think it's gonna get better by the holidays." But it didn't get better. Southwest Airlines cancelled and delayed thousands of flights in late December, leaving thousands of travelers stranded over the Christmas and New Year's holidays. Representative Rohan Khanna, Democrat of California, slammed Buttigieg. He's also doing this because Rohan Khanna is also a big Bernie Sanders guy. That's why he's criticizing Buttigieg, okay? Slammed Buttigieg in a tweet saying, "The mess with Southwest could have been avoided. Nearly 6 months ago, Bernie Sanders and I called for Buttigieg to implement fines and penalties on airlines for cancelling flights. Why were these recommendations not followed? This mess with Southwest could have been avoided. We need bold action." In the late hours of January 10, the Federal Aviation Administration experienced massive system failure, which resulted in thousands of cancelled and delayed flights. Does this sound like a first world thriving democracy to you guys? This sounds like what India used to go through 20 years back. You really have to wonder which kind of people with what kind of qualifications are getting these jobs. Buttigieg didn't address the issue until several hours later, tweeting that the FAA was working, quote-unquote, working to resolve this issue swiftly. 1 week later, United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby told reporters that there are, quote-unquote, systemic challenges that are going to limit the growth in flights, and that airlines are going to continue to book flights they can't reasonably handle. What happened over the holidays wasn't a one-time event caused by the weather, and it wasn't just one airline. Lawmakers on the Senate Commerce, Science and Transportation Committee called out Buttigieg. Ranking member Senator Ted Cruz, he's a Republican from Texas, slammed the Transportation Secretary for not being there. Notably absent from today's meeting is Secretary Buttigieg, Cruz said. The DOT didn't give any mea culpa to impacted travelers. The Biden Department of Transport didn't issue refunds, didn't issue reimbursements. It just screwed up their flights and then proceeded to say, "We want to be in charge of how the airlines behave," Cruz said. In her opening statement, Committee Chairwoman Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington, declared that this sector needs a more effective policeman on the beat. They need someone over at the Department of Transportation who is going to get the job done. Yeah, she hopes. Her office later claimed she was referring to DOT's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. Another prominent Democratic leader, Senator Bernie Sanders, so-called independent of Vermont, he always remains independent until it's time for elections, also called out Buttigieg over the airline meltdown in July and said the airline's treatment of customers is quote-unquote simply unacceptable. And while Buttigieg has spent much of his tenure addressing commercial delays, he has used government-managed private jets on at least 18 occasions since taking office. The Transportation Secretary previously came under fire in December after it was revealed he vacationed in Portugal, which his agency and the White House were locked in tense negotiations while his agency and the White House were locked in tense negotiations with rail worker unions to avert a strike that could have had a dire impact on the US economy. Can you imagine the world meltdown if the transport minister of India behaved this way? It's good. We are under so much spotlight and challenges and stress tests. This improves our society. This improves our government. This makes us more resilient and enduring to all sorts of nonsense from the world. The Department of Transportation said at the time that the vacation was a long-planned personal trip. Congress eventually approved a deal backed by the White House. In 2021, Buttigieg's tenure was plagued by the supply chain crisis, when a trucker shortage slowed transportation and ships were forced to wait off the coast of California due to onshore logjams. The crisis led to shortages of household items like toilet paper, raw materials needed for construction, and critical tech components like semiconductors. The shortages in turn led to higher prices for consumers. Buttigieg, though, blamed the crisis on President Biden's successful economic agenda during an interview in October 2021. Demand is up. That's why the problem is happening. That's what he said. He said demand is up because income is up, because the president has successfully guided the economy out of the teeth of a terrifying recession. Can you believe this guy? This is the transport minister of the first world nation, the thriving democracy that USA is or claims to be. And this sounds like the transport minister of a poverty-stricken Bimaru state of India, doesn't it? Demand is up. That's why this transport chain problem has appeared. Buttigieg also took a multi-month paternity leave during the heart of the crisis, which sparked criticism. So anyway, to conclude, guys, remember, always beware of leftists, stay away from them, politically, conceptually and culturally, because they will turn whatever good thing you have into absolute crap.